Hey folks, Thomas Wendt back with you here for Drum Factory Direct. Welcome back to this series that we are doing on the basic fundamentals of playing American jazz music on the American drum set. Thank you so much for being with us again today. Now, if you watched the first lesson in this series, we basically dealt with becoming familiar with and assimilating the general swinging pulse of this music, just playing quarter notes along with some great recordings. Now today what we're going to focus on is the feet and all that we are doing with the feet when we're playing this basic jazz groove. Now if you watched that first lesson, you heard me use the phrase feathering the bass drum. Now if this is a new phrase to you, the concept is really pretty simple. All you're going to be doing is playing a very, very light 4 to the bar on the bass drum with the hi-hat nice and strong and consistent on beats 2 and 4. So at a nice slow tempo, your feet should look and sound something like this. All right, I hope you could see and hear the dynamic separation between the two feet. The bass drum really needs to be very soft and the hi-hat is really fairly strong. Now, at this point, I should point out something that's really important. All of this advice that I'm giving you is for general playing purposes. There are going to be many times when you're playing this music where you might not want to feather the bass drum all the time. You might not want to play the hi-hat on 2 and 4 in a nice, strong, consistent way. That's totally fine, and there are plenty of musical moments where this is not called for. But for general playing purposes, we all need to be able to feather the bass drum and play the hi-hat consistently on 2 and 4 at a lot of different tempos, and most importantly, we need to be able to control this. Very, very important. Now, if you're finding it difficult to maintain that dynamic separation, even at a slow tempo like what I just demonstrated, don't worry about it. Put the metronome on at a nice slow tempo and work with the metronome for a little while until you start to feel more comfortable. As you feel more comfortable, grab those headphones and find a good recording at a slow tempo and play along with the recording just with your feet and see if you can lock in with the bass player on the recording while maintaining that dynamic separation between your feet. So if we kick the tempo up just a little bit more to a more medium tempo, your feet should sound and look something like this. Okay, so before we go any further, I want to explain the relationship between feathering the bass drum and the bass player. Remember, the bass player is your friend, and we want to keep it that way. So when we're feathering the bass drum, really the function of that is to support the bass player's notes. So the visual that I always think of in my mind, if my fist is the bass player's note, the bass drum is sort of the plate that the bass player's note is sitting on. We're just supporting what he or she is playing. And the other thing about feathering the bass drum is it's really the bottom of our sound. That's something that's very important to remember while you're playing with other musicians and you're doing this. Okay? Now, if we bring the tempo up even a little bit further to a medium to medium up tempo, your feet should look and sound something like this. Now, a common question that you might have is, how fast do I feather the bass drum? Do I feather it at all tempos or just some tempos? It's a great question, and I feather the bass drum at most tempos. When the tempo really gets fast, I'm not going to feather the bass drum because even if I can do it real light, it can still, at a really fast tempo, it can still make the beat feel a little heavy, which most of the time we really don't want. Now, this is about how fast I will feather the bass drum personally, like this. All right, so before we wrap up today's lesson, I'm going to give you an example going back to a much slower tempo with everything together. Ride cymbal, bass drum feathering, hi-hat on 2 and 4, and the left hand comping. Now, one thing you'll notice is when we comp, a lot of times we're using the snare drum, but we also use the bass drum to comp as well. And one thing I want you to notice is I am feathering the bass drum, but when I use the bass drum in my comping, after I'm done playing whatever figure I'm going to play on the bass drum, I don't go right back to feathering immediately. I'll give it a beat and a half, maybe even as much as 2 beats, and I'll sneak the feathering bass drum back in nice and lightly, so I'm not disturbing the groove, so to speak. So everything put together at a nice slow tempo will sound and look like this. All right, well, that's going to do it for today's lesson. I hope this has given you some more insight into what goes into playing some of the basic elements of this music. Now, next time, we are going to be focusing on the ever-important ride cymbal beat. But until then, take your time with this stuff. Get more and more comfortable with it. Keep playing along with those classic recordings. And next time, we'll take it a little bit further. Now, before we go, since we've been talking about playing 4 on the floor today, I wanted to give a big shout out to my man John McCaslin at the 4 on the Floor Jazz Drumming blog. If you're not familiar with John, check out 4 on the Floor on social media and on the web as well. All kind of great jazz drumming content, past and present. So much great stuff to learn from on the 4 on the Floor blog. I look forward to seeing you guys next time. And as always, stay safe and stay close to the music. Thanks so much.